Leah Morano vanished without a trace in an abandoned paper mill. Matteo Varela walked into a shuttered mall store and was never seen again. Dr. Felix Ambrose died clutching secrets about erased memories, and 3 men in Maple Hollow were found marked with a symbol no one can explain. Different names, different towns. But now, all signs point to a single shadow hiding behind them all. Someone who's been watching, erasing, and waiting. Leah Morano had always walked the line between fascination and danger. As a freelance photographer based in Portland, Oregon, she specialized in urban decay, crumbling buildings, forgotten motels, rusted-out warehouses. Her photos had a haunting beauty, and she gained a modest online following. Leah was known for her curiosity, often venturing into places most people avoided. Friends said she wasn't reckless, just deeply drawn to silence and shadows. On March 12, 2023, she packed up her camera gear, left a note for her roommate saying she'd be out all day, and drove her Subaru into the countryside. Her destination, an abandoned paper mill near the edge of the Sanchim Forest, about 40 miles from the city. The mill had a long, strange history. Shut down in the 1980s after a fire damaged much of the upper floors, it had since become a local ghost story. Some said it was haunted. Others warned about unstable structures or squatters. Lee wasn't bothered. She'd photographed worse places. Her last known activity was an Instagram post at 4:18 p.m. It showed a wide shot of the mill's broken windows, light flaring through the dust. The caption was just a single word, accuse. That photo marked the last time anyone heard from her. When Lee didn't return by the next morning, her roommate contacted police. A search team was sent to the paper mill, where they found her car parked just outside the gate. The engine was off, the keys were still in the ignition, and her bag was inside, but her camera was gone. Searchers scoured the property for days. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, no broken equipment. The only odd detail was a set of footprints leading into the main building, but none coming out. Investigators suspected she had fallen through weak flooring or gotten trapped, but thermal imaging and ground penetrating radar showed nothing. Not even a body. The case caught the attention of internet sleuths who began combing through Leah's online presence. In doing so, they found something chilling. For the past 2 months, Lee had been receiving anonymous messages, tips about obscure locations that had barely been documented. Most of these came through encrypted platforms. The name Elias Keenan appeared once, attached to a user profile that quickly vanished. Another message read, "You see what they buried." Nobody could trace the sender. Authorities believed someone may have lured her out there under false pretenses. But who and why? Months passed with no developments. In early 2024, the case was quietly downgraded in priority, though her family continued pushing for answers. Then, almost a year later, something unexpected happened. In January 2025, a mail carrier found an unmarked package in a USPS drop box in a nearby town. Inside was Leah's missing camera, wrapped in plastic, battery removed. There were no fingerprints, no return address, and no traceable shipping origin. Forensics retrieved the memory card, and its contents stunned investigators. Nearly every file was corrupted, showing only static or fragmented pixels. But one photo was intact. It showed a dim corridor inside the mill, sunlight bleeding through a broken window. In the reflection of the glass, Leah could be seen looking into the lens, and behind her, a figure in dark clothing and a smooth, pale mask almost blending into the background. The photo's metadata showed it was taken just minutes after her last Instagram post. Police reopened the case, but they were no closer to answers. The identity of the masked figure was never determined. There were no leads, no witnesses, and no explanation as to how the camera ended up hundreds of miles away, undamaged after nearly 2 years. Lee Morano remained missing. Theories ranged from a calculated abduction to cult involvement to supernatural forces, but nothing could be proven. Her disappearance has become one of the most disturbing unsolved mysteries of recent years, leaving behind only a single, silent image and too many unanswered questions. Maple Hollow was the kind of quiet town people moved to when they wanted to disappear from the noise of modern life. Tucked away in Virginia's wooded hills, it had one diner, one post office, and not much else. For decades, the crime rate had been almost non-existent, until November 2022, when 3 murders shattered its silence and stained its reputation forever. The killings didn't just happen close together. They were methodical, ritualistic, and left behind symbols that no one could explain. The first body was found on November 2nd. Daniel Creek, a 58-year-old retired high school teacher, was discovered in his home by a neighbor. He lived alone and rarely had visitors. His house was untouched. No signs of forced entry, robbery, or struggle. He was seated in his armchair, eyes closed as if asleep. But a closer look revealed a gruesome mark carved into his forehead, a triangle inside a circle. Autopsy reports revealed he had been killed by a fast-acting paralytic toxin. He likely never felt a thing. Just 9 days later, on November 11th, the second victim was found. Walter Phelps, 54, worked at the local library and was known for his reclusive nature. His death mirrored Daniel's. Same method, same mark, same eerie calm in the way the body was positioned. Police began to suspect a serial killer was operating under their noses, but there was no connection between the two victims beyond their age and solitude. Then came the third killing. Fred McNamara, a handyman and known town gossip, was found dead on his front porch on November 20th. This time, there was something new. A folded paper was left in his mailbox. It was typed, short and cryptic. They listened. Others will not. Once again, the same symbol was carved into his skin. Investigators were baffled. They searched through town records, scoured old police reports, and interviewed dozens of residents. No one reported seeing anything. No one heard anything. The only pattern was that all three victims were older, lived alone, and had little contact with others. Forensic experts found no fingerprints, DNA, or any trace of the killer. Every house had been locked from the inside. In December, the sheriff's office received another anonymous letter. This time, it had no words, just the triangle, circle symbol stamped in red ink on a black sheet of paper. The envelope had no return address, and the postmark came from a neighboring town that had no surveillance at the post office. The symbol became the center of speculation. Was it connected to a cult, a secret society, a personal vendetta? Then a new voice emerged. Claire Dunn, a local woman who had grown up in Maple Hollow but moved away years ago. She returned after her uncle's death and went through his belongings. In an old locked chest, she found strange writings and symbols that matched the ones found on the victims. Her uncle, she claimed, had once been involved in a secret group called the Listening Circle, a kind of amateur philosophical society from the 1970s that believed in mental clarity through silence. Some of the texts hinted at cleansing, those who interfered with inner silence. Police investigated her claim, but found no official record of such a group. Some of her uncle's papers were missing, and Claire herself began receiving strange calls at night, breathing, clicking noises, and silence. Then, in February 2023, she left town without explanation. Her phone number was disconnected. Her apartment was vacated. The murders stopped. No further letters arrived. The investigation slowed and eventually faded from headlines. But in April 2025, a tip line received a chilling message from a payphone hundreds of miles away. A muffled voice said only 6 words before hanging up, "You stopped looking too soon." To this day, no suspects have been identified, no further clues have surfaced, and the symbol remains a mystery. Maple Hollow returned to its quiet ways, but the fear never truly left. Everyone knows the killer was never caught. Everyone wonders who might be next. Brighton Mall once stood as a vibrant shopping destination in New Jersey during the late 1990s, filled with families, teenagers, and the sounds of everyday life. But by 2024, it was a shell of its former self. Most of the storefronts were empty, the food court long abandoned, and only a handful of small businesses remained open during the day. At night, the entire structure turned eerily quiet. The security staff had been reduced to just one person on the night shift, Matteo Varela. Matteo was 37 years old, soft-spoken, and meticulous in his work. He had spent the last 5 years guarding Brighton Mall's empty halls. Most nights were uneventful. He patrolled with a flashlight, listened to late-night radio through a single earbud, and occasionally logged minor things like a broken door or flickering lights. But starting in early October 2024, things began to change. Matteo started noting strange occurrences in the security log, footsteps echoing from areas that were locked, music playing faintly from stores without power, and mannequins shifting positions overnight. At first, his reports were dismissed as boredom or imagination. On November 6, 2024, something happened that would turn his quiet routine into one of the most unsettling unsolved cases in the state. That night, Security footage shows Mateo entering the Jansen furniture store at exactly 2:34 a.m. The footage from outside the store captured his shadow moving behind the glass doors, then freezing for several seconds. At 2:38 a.m., the camera flickered and the feed went dark. When it resumed a minute later, the room was empty. Mateo had vanished. When police arrived the next morning, they found no signs of forced entry or violence. Mateo's flashlight was lying on the floor near a toppled chair, and a torn patch of his uniform was snagged on a splintered shelf. His phone was never recovered. The interior of the store, covered in layers of dust, showed only one set of footprints, his. No blood, no fingerprints, and no sign of a struggle. Investigators checked every possible angle. Mall blueprints were studied, and even areas sealed off since renovations in the early 2000s were opened up. Nothing. Dogs picked up a faint scent trail that ended abruptly in a stairwell that led to the mall's old boiler room, now sealed and unused. There were no exits from that area. As word of Mateo's disappearance spread, internet investigators and local paranormal groups grew interested. Brighton Mall had long been rumored to be built over land that once belonged to a 19th-century sanitarium. Some even believed that rituals were held in the woods before the land was cleared for development. Though these stories were never proven, one chilling detail reignited interest. Above the Jansen furniture entrance, partially hidden under peeling wallpaper, was a faint carving of a triangle inside a circle, the same symbol connected to unsolved murders in Virginia. 2 weeks after Mateo's disappearance, new security footage emerged from the lower west wing of the mall. In it, a pale figure, resembling Mateo, can be seen walking slowly through the corridor. His face appears blank, almost like a mask. The footage is grainy, and the lighting is poor, but it was enough to trigger a second round of investigations. Forensic analysis found no tampering, but the timestamp was wrong, set to a day before his reported disappearance. Yet no guard was on shift that night, and no one should have been inside. Despite the renewed interest, no evidence ever surfaced to explain what happened to Mateo. The mall was shut down completely in early 2025, and the building remains abandoned. Urban explorers who sneaked in later claimed to hear voices in the empty halls, and sometimes found strange markings drawn in dust. Police officially closed the investigation in March 2025, citing lack of evidence and no signs of foul play. But locals still whisper about the phantom of Brighton Mall. The question that remains isn't just where Mateo went, but what or who was waiting for him in that dark, forgotten store. Dr. Felix Ambrose was a man respected in the world of science, particularly in the field of neuroscience. He had published multiple groundbreaking papers on memory formation and neural pathways. Based in Seattle, he worked for a private research lab that partnered with several government institutions. But behind his carefully maintained public image, Felix was known by colleagues as eccentric, secretive, and obsessed with a theory he rarely shared. He believed that memory could not only be modified, but completely fabricated, down to the last detail, without the subject knowing. His colleagues thought it was just a far-fetched idea, one of many he had explored over the years, but what no one realized was how far he had taken it. On February 14, 2023, Felix was found dead inside his lab after failing to attend a scheduled meeting. The lab's doors were locked from the inside. His body was discovered slumped over a table with a cup of coffee nearby. Toxicology confirmed he had ingested a rare compound that caused cardiac arrest in minutes. It was labeled a suicide at first, until investigators uncovered something strange inside a hidden panel in his office. Behind the false wall was a cabinet containing dozens of labeled hard drives, notebooks, and tapes. The contents painted a disturbing picture. The tapes showed interviews with individuals from various parts of the country. Each person appeared confused, disoriented, and unaware of how they had come to be in Felix's lab. Their stories were inconsistent, and in many cases, their identities didn't match official records. Some said they had dreams that weren't theirs. Others spoke about towns and families that didn't exist. A few broke down, convinced they had lived two separate lives. The recordings always ended with Felix saying a chilling phrase, "They won't remember this tomorrow." Among the handwritten notes, there were references to a group Felix called the Revisionists. According to his journals, this was an anonymous network of individuals who allegedly worked within media, academia, and tech companies to alter perception and history by targeting memories. Felix wrote that their goal was not to change the world physically but mentally, shifting facts, rewriting personal experiences, and erasing events from collective memory. He believed he had encountered several members in his early career, posing as clients or investors. But he had no proof. His last entry, written a day before his death, read, "They're already in. No more rewinds. If you find this, assume they've found you too." The investigation hit a dead end when many of Felix's research files were sealed by a federal agency. The public was told it involved proprietary government data. The lab was shut down. Then, in September 2023, something even more unsettling occurred. Suki Yang, Felix's former lab assistant, went missing during a backpacking trip in Norway. She had previously told a friend that she felt she was being followed, and that someone had accessed her private cloud storage. Norwegian authorities later recovered her laptop in a river, completely wiped and with no signs of damage from water exposure. By mid-2024, both the media and law enforcement began stepping back from the case. Too many elements didn't make sense, and too many questions had no answers. But online forums kept digging. One user claimed to have found a backup of Felix's original website, where a broken contact page showed a list of names. One of them, Elias Keane, no one could trace the account. To this day, Dr. Felix Ambrose's death remains unexplained. Whether he was a scientist who lost touch with reality or someone who discovered something too dangerous to share, no one can say for sure. The tapes, the missing assistant, and the erased records leave behind a haunting trail. Some believe he was silenced. Others say he tampered with minds too deeply and paid the price. Either way, the truth, whatever it may be, disappeared with him. By early 2025, whispers began to echo across online forums, true crime podcasts, and underground message boards. 4 separate cases in different states, with no obvious connection, were starting to show disturbing similarities. On the surface, each case was self-contained. The disappearance of photographer Leah Morano in Oregon, the Maple Hollow murders in Virginia, the vanishing of security guard Matteo Varela in New Jersey, and the suspicious death of neuroscientist Dr. Felix Ambrose in Seattle. Each one baffled investigators and left trails of unanswered questions. But beneath the surface, digital sleuths began to spot faint threads pulling these stories together. It began when a user on a cold case forum posted a high-resolution scan of the cryptic symbol found on the victims in Maple Hollow, a triangle inside a circle. Within hours, someone matched it to a small detail in one of Lee Morano's final photos, hidden in the corner of a broken window frame. Another user noted that a similar symbol had been seen in Brighton Mall, etched above the entrance to the abandoned furniture store where Matteo disappeared. At first, these connections were dismissed as coincidences or conspiracy theories. But then came the name, Elias Keane. The name had first appeared in Leah's digital communications, tied to encrypted tips about dangerous, abandoned locations. Months later, the same name surfaced again in Dr. Felix Ambrose's archived emails, where a message marked, "URGEM," ended with, "Brighton is Phase 3 EK." Investigators had overlooked it, assuming it was meaningless. But online researchers took it seriously. Who or what was Elias Keane? No public records of anyone by that name existed. No birth certificates, tax records, or social media. But the name continued to appear in strange places, buried metadata on one of Felix's old blog posts, embedded code in a surveillance server at Brighton Mall, and even in an anonymous tip submitted to the Maple Hollow Police Department in late 2024. Every trace of the name led to a dead end. As users dug deeper, a chilling theory began to take form. What if these weren't isolated incidents at all? What if they were part of something larger, something organized? Some speculated that all 4 individuals, Leah, Matteo, Felix, and even the Maple Hollow victims, had stumbled onto a truth that wasn't meant to be uncovered. A hidden network, not of killers or criminals, but of erasers. People who didn't just want to eliminate threats, but to rewrite them out of existence entirely. The theory pointed toward the idea that the symbol, the triangle inside a circle, wasn't just a mark, but a message. Some believed it represented containment or control. Others thought it marked someone who had seen too much. Even more unsettling, there were claims from unrelated users that they had seen the symbol before, in childhood homes, in old photographs, even in recurring dreams. Most were dismissed as delusions. But the stories kept coming. Attempts to reach out to law enforcement brought nothing. Most agencies denied any links between the cases. Files were sealed, inquiries redirected, and journalists who tried to connect the dots found themselves warned off or ignored. Meanwhile, amateur investigators began reporting strange occurrences: lost files, damaged computers, even unexplained visits from men claiming to be researchers or consultants. Many went silent afterward. Their posts stopped. Their usernames vanished. The deeper people searched, the more fragmented the trail became, like someone was covering it in real time. And yet the coincidences kept piling up. Leah's camera, the one returned nearly 2 years after her disappearance, contained corrupted images that experts said had been altered post-capture. Mateo's security footage from Brighton Mall had timestamps that didn't match mall logs. Felix's files referenced missing persons never reported in any database. The Maple Hollow victims all had connections, no matter how faint, to a defunct university experiment from the 1980s involving memory alteration. The cases remain officially unsolved. The connections are denied. But those who continue to look know one thing for certain: none of these people simply disappeared. They were removed, not just from the world, but from the story itself.